Recording. Welcome to the Bizniz Salon.
Number
Get the
three.
bid. Number 3. Tom, Catherine, John. They're in. Hello. Hi, folks.
Hello.
Tom's here, our biggest fan. Welcome to number 3, Tom. Oh, I can't hear you. It's all right. Oh, you're muted, Tom. Sorry, you were chatting.
I was just rudeness, so it's okay.
Okay, great, perfect. We've got Catherine as well. Hi, Catherine. Oh, I can't hear you either. We've got lots of beards, you're saying?
I'm missing a beard.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put on the invite that you have to bring a beard with you.
Just looking around in the most creative way to say, how can I like make a beard now?
You can make it with your hair, I guess. Yes, perfect. Hi, John Barnes. John's in. And hi, Christina. If you could pop your video on, Christina, that would be great, so we can see everyone.
Does Christina have a beard?
Christina, hey.
Hey, Christina.
Sorry, I was not prepared for video, but okay.
Oh, okay, it's all right. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's just.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Cool. Nice. All right, I've opened it up now, so if anyone else is going to drop in, then they can drop in. Cool. Welcome to Bizniz Salon. Good. You can carry on doing that, Catherine. That was great. Just trying to perfect my hair beard there. Yeah. Welcome to Bizniz Salon number 3. Talking about fuck ups today. Talking about failure and all the glorious things that go wrong. Before we start, just wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this and we post these online afterwards. So if you end up saying something that you don't want to be public, then you can let me know and I can edit it out, or just kind of be aware as you're talking that it will go out on the internet. And yeah, me and Andy were chatting earlier today about what the kind of vibe that we want from these things. And the vibe's been really great so far, and we just want to continue that really. So we'd love people to be as open as possible, especially this time we're talking about failures and exploring that. So we'd love you guys to be open about your failures. We'd love you to be real as well, to avoid as much kind of jargon and business nonsense as possible, and just kind of get to the real stuff. And then finally to be respectful, because we're going to be talking about things that didn't work so well today. So let's try not to kind of bring people in if they're not in the room, and try and own our failures as much as possible. Is that about right, Andy? Sound good? Cool. Okay. Well, we're while some other people might pop in, we'll just crack on. We thought we'd start by with me and Andy sharing some of our failures, and then we'd love to hear some of yours, and then we can just kind of open the discussion up. Really, that sound good? Yes. And John, well, I run a business, John, so my failures, the two I'm going to talk about are our failures, but you can bring yours in as well, John, if you want. And this, Andy mentioned that this looks a lot like Bailey's. I'm not drinking an iced Bailey's. It's just an iced coffee. Cool. So the first failure I want to talk about is the thing that we called the Flux sales network. So when me and John run a company called Flux, we're like a consulting company, a small consulting company, and we help organizations to change the way they work. But when we started 2 years ago, and when we started, we had like slightly cocky ambitions to like make a mark on the world and be like have a big splash and be important, I guess. So we came up with this concept called the sales network, where anyone anywhere in the world could set up their own like version of Flux, of this company that we'd only started a few weeks previously, and we were going to like share that with the world and get them to do stuff wherever they were. So we made a little like web page for it and put it out on the internet, and like within a few days 100 people signed up to be part of this network, which like didn't exist for a company that had only started a few weeks previously. But it was amazing. Like, it was amazing to have like that kind of validation, which kind of fed our fed this this like slightly cocky attitude that we had. But it was awesome. So I started like calling these people and interviewing them and saying like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do to start your Flux cell out in, like, I mean, we had people all over the place, like North America, South America, the Middle East, Asia, like people everywhere. And yeah, it was a failure because it just didn't go anywhere really. We had this plan and like we stoked all this enthusiasm in people, and it just kind of fizzled out because we didn't really, there wasn't really much substance behind it. It was a thing that was like totally driven by this kind of a misguided notion of like scaling rapidly and having this big global impact when like we were like nowhere near ready to do anything like that at that stage. So we just kind of had to like pull the plug on it all. We had like 20 people in our Slack team, and it was like costing us loads of money and loads of time, and it was really stressing us out. So we just like, yeah, we just decided to kill it one day. Yeah, and it's a little, I don't know, I find it a little embarrassing now, this the sales thing, but whatever, we've moved on from it. And the second one, which was this thing that we were calling Dream Hackers, was this online course that I spent like a month last year, like a solid month, building this online course to help people start companies. And we we kind of went all in on it. We were like, right, this is what our company does now. We don't do consulting. We run this online course, and we like had this plan to get, can you remember what the plan is, John? We were like, yeah, within a year, we're going to have like 1,000 subscribers, and we're going to be bringing in like...
It was big numbers, for sure. It was big numbers.
Big number, like a nice big graph going up and to the right. And yeah, I put all this time into it. And we went on like a tour around Albania, trying to pitch it to Albanians, which was mental looking back, actually. And then, yeah, again, and we had one person sign up. And then we like embarrassingly had to just say like, oh, sorry, it's actually just not going to happen, because
we had to give them their money back as well.
Yeah, I had to give this guy his money back. Poor guy. Yeah, so that was a total failure and a complete waste of my entire summer last year. But I mean, I learned some great stuff about how to build online things. But yeah, it was a glorious failure, that one. So they're my two. Andy, what are yours?
Oh, good. I get to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Jim said earlier, we had a wee chat earlier about what was, or some of the stuff, or where we might position today. I went to an event last night that the Service Design Network ran in Glasgow, which was, I think there was about 60 or 70 people there, which was quite cool, and they were talking about failure. And it was interesting because for me, I wanted to, shift the dynamic quite quickly. So I'm going to go quite deep, quite quick with two of mine. And not really talk about projects necessarily, but the sort of blend between professional and personal. Just to say, I represent Scotland's Flux cell, which is cool. So I'm still owning that brand. No, so I guess I'll do two quite quick. I think the first one for me, the biggest one, or one of the big ones that I'm reflecting on a lot now, because I have a cool group of friends I can talk to a lot of this stuff about, was early on in my career. I think one of my biggest fuck-ups was not being honest about how my mental health was impacting me at work and my relationship with the people I worked with and the clients I worked with. I was quite fortunate because there was a company I worked for where I started early and I was involved in running projects and working with teams and supporting people in those teams. And I guess one of my biggest reflections from that was my role as a role model, or just a colleague and a friend and somebody else in that team. So if I'm not able to be honest and open about what's going on for me in relation to my mental health and how I'm feeling and the impact that has on my work. What does that role model to the other people around me? You know, the fact that I'm saying, I'm fine, I'm good, and then suddenly, you know, I'm off for a week for an undisclosed illness, or, you know, like, you make up some bullshit. So I think that's one of my big fuck ups, was not really being sincere about what was happening for me and what continues to happen in relation to my mental health and how that impacts my work. And I'm a bit more fortunate now because I'm self-employed and I work with cool clients who I'm able to be a bit more open with in terms of that relationship. But it felt harder when there was a 9 to 5 and responsibilities, and I had to turn up every day and all of that sort of stuff. So I think for me, the first one was, how I role modelled, or how I feel I role modelled my well-being in the context of peers and people around me. Leah's joined.
Yes.
Hey, Leah.
Hi, Leah. We're just sharing our fuck ups.
And my second one, I'll do this one really. I'll try and do this one quickly too. And this touches on some of the stuff that was mentioned last night at the event too, especially by Leah as well, which is great because she's just joined. There was a project we were working on, and early doors when I was doing this work, the organisations we were working with were really interested in embedding designers in their organisation to support culture change or mindset shift, or whatever word you want to use for that sort of stuff. And somebody said something last night, which I can't, if you've got a culture of fear, none of your fancy processes work. It was actually Leah who said it. And Leah said it and quoted somebody else. I can't remember. She'll tell me who the quote was later. But if you've got a culture of fear, none of your fancy processes work. And I was quite young and naive in my professional career then, and really believed that these fancy design processes that we were selling to clients would create change and make shit happen. And I had a particular project, a number of them, but one in particular where a member of staff went to be embedded in an organisation, and we hadn't done any of the groundwork to really understand if the space that they were going into was safe, if they were, you know, what that environment looked like. Because I thought all of this stuff that we'd done, we could put them in, plonk them into this work environment, and good shit would happen. And good shit didn't happen. Bad shit happened. And relationships broke down. There was bullying. There were tears from everybody. It was a total shit show. And that was because I didn't respect the fact that actually before you put anybody into any kind of context in a work environment, I think there has to be groundwork and foundation work done to make sure that the environment they're going to is safe, that they're respected, that they're looked after. And coming back to this point around culture of fear, the organisation it was a local council and it existed for a long time. And there was, I think, 8 or 9 people. They described themselves as the Rolling Stones of the public sector, which says more about their age than their rock star style, I think. But that really was has been a burden I still carry, because I was responsible for running that project and working with the team members who were involved in that. And my naivety and immaturity as a designer and sort of project manager at that time meant that I wasn't careful enough about the environment that person was going into, and left them in an unsafe place. And so I'm really excited to hear from other people today about their fuck ups, their learnings, and I guess from the crew that are here today, what we can share and learn from that.
Nice, thanks, Andy. Cool. Let's open it up then. So, if you've just got like thoughts or opinions on failing and fucking up, share those. Or if you've got a story you want to share, or a confession you want to make, share that too. Just jump in if you want to jump in.
I'm going to jump in terms of the topic of like not setting things up properly. So I was working on quite a sensitive project, conducting research, and completely hadn't kind of set ourselves up for debriefs and and kind of looking after ourselves. And I think I was very much on the receiving end of that being difficult, which was a fuck up and something that I'm quite glad happened within the team and not with the client. So now when we're kind of broaching quite difficult subjects, that's something that we very much like put into place at the start. So that's my.
This is Maya, by the way.
Oh right, yeah. Straight into the fuck ups.
Straight in. Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, I think bulldozing ahead in not always a good thing.
I guess knowing like because sometimes bulldozing ahead does work, I reckon, but sometimes it just doesn't. And I guess like fucking up is a good way to teach us like when it's right and when it's wrong.
I think when you bulldoze. Oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead, Catherine, please.
No, I was just going to say, when you bulldoze, I think you know that sometimes it's going to go wrong, and that's kind of part of the deal. So I'm very instinctive, and I will get like ridiculous ideas, and at the time, and it's quite often, you know, late at night or in another time zone or something, I'm like, this is great, we're going to send Valentine's cards from America to all of our clients. And like I did that, and it was a total bomb, and hardly anyone ever mentioned it. But at the time, you know, I was so excited, and I'm like going down the post office to get stamps, but I'm amused by it. So even though the fact that it totally bombed, I'm still like, well, yeah, remember that time we sent Valentine's cards? That was really funny. Total disaster, but really like. So I think I try now not to send quite so many late night emails when I have a really creative idea, because I'm like, well, just write the email and then, yeah, maybe just send it tomorrow. But I think it's kind of a part of the deal if that's your nature, to be sort of a bit crazy and creative, and yeah, these ideas come when they come. And yeah, the downside, like the flip side of that, is sometimes it's going to be total shit and you're going to be embarrassed, but you can laugh about it.
I just want to build on this theme of bulldozing, or there's something about passion in here in a few of these stories. And I have, well, early on in my career, I had a temptation to always like blag slightly further than it was actually okay for me to blag. So I'd often like advise, consult, speak, when really it was like the job of someone with a couple more years experience than me to do that. And to be fair, I can't remember a time it really went wrong, but there's always that feeling that it might. And I've definitely had it with other things like the sales fuck up that Jim mentioned, because that's also my fuck up. Had it the other way round, writing a book, feeling, is it okay for me to do this or not? Or am I about to go, is my passion and are my emotions just totally taking over here? And what I think it feels interesting, because it feels like a moment where you could be taking a risk and stretching your comfort zone, and therefore it could go great, it could pay off, you could learn loads, you could boost your confidence, or you could just like go straight into a wall and feel terrible and affect someone else negatively. And I feel like a job that I have to do continuously at the moment is when I have like flashes of brilliance where I want to run to the post office, or I've got some mad idea, to like, I'll normally start writing an email, leave it in my drafts and go, I'm going to come back to that in a few days, or I'm going to like meditate on it, or I'm going to go for a walk. And when my emotional state is a 5 out of 10, then I'll decide if that idea I had when I felt over the moon was good or bad. So I feel like learning to notice my own like pseudomania and then decide what I'm going to do with that is really important. And I've definitely not figured out how to do it yet. I think that probably is a skill of maturity and growing up.
Yeah, I have a lot of draft posts in Medium of things, because I don't know what I think until I write it. So I've written like a bunch of launch things about crazy stuff I wanted to launch, or I was thinking about launching, and then I just leave them in drafts in Medium. And then, yeah, if it's still on your mind, then it's something to go back to later on. But in that moment, that frenzied manic kind of moment. It's just like, just get it down and then leave it, walk away.
But
Jim, do you want to build on that?
Personality types here. It seems almost like there are people who, well, like John and maybe Catherine, like people who are like 0 to 10 emotionally. Like, are you guys more prone to taking risks and like potentially failing?
Yes.
Than like I'm more of a kind of 4 to 6, or like maybe a bit more like 3 to 8 now. I've been hanging out with John and my wife Ellie, who are like insane. Yeah, I wonder if it's like if risk taking and failure is more of a, some people are more prone to it than others.
But isn't that like the entrepreneur profile anyway? I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know, because I definitely think what's coming up is an interesting recipe for a partnership. Because whilst I mean, working with Jim is amazing for me because I go 0 to 10, and when I'm a 0, he's like, things are actually all right, mate. And when I'm like an 11 on 10, and it's starting to feel like a rockumentary, at that point, Jim's a 5, and he's able to say, "Cool, yeah, let's talk about that tomorrow, maybe." Or and it definitely helps me be a bit less mad. Not to neglect that Jim has his own insanity, of course, but it definitely helps me to weigh mine off with his.
I'm going to try and draw Christina in. Hey, Christina. Because I think one of the fuck-ups you made was asking me to design your website in Flash when we were at university together, which probably didn't last very long. Remember that? I built you CMYK or some CMYK website in Flash. That was a dreadful thing. But it was fun at the time. Yeah, wondering if you got any thoughts.
I mean, I kind of struggle with the term fuck up, I have to say. There's something launched, I'm based in Malmö in Sweden, and there's something launched here called Malmö Fuck Up Nights, where they have this Pecha Kucha style event where people come and they share. And I think for me, there's not a lot of fuck ups. I love that website. And at the time, it made complete sense. Everyone was learning Flash. You know, it's the same with, you know, everyone's on Flinto just now and will be on something else within 2 years. And I think, but what I think we forget, and I think what a lot of people they're not trained to do it, and I think we don't take time to do it, is to reflect. Because like nothing's a fuck up as long as you learn from it. And I think that's what I struggle sometimes with, is just taking that time to go, okay, why did it go right? Or why did it go, you know, wrong? And what can we change about it? Because I think what you mentioned, Andy, with regards to kind of an environment, I've had a similar situation last year where we weren't necessarily in the best environment and we weren't set up to have the conversations with the client that the client was prepared to do. And we almost lost some staff because they found themselves in their first time project and it was very stressful. And at the same time with what, I think it was Mia, sorry, I can't see the name, but we did the same thing with regards to research, and we had no debriefing after having really serious conversations when I was working at Macmillan Cancer Support. And we then realised, okay, the next time we do this. But I think if you don't try, and if something doesn't go wrong, then nothing gets better and nothing gets done. But I think there could be some better, I don't know, maybe tools or ways in which, how do you reflect and how can you make that part of your practice? Because I think a bit like documentation, it's something we all know we should do, but we don't. So, I mean, I'd love to hear about if people have any suggestions for how they reflect on things that go right or wrong and how they take stock of that.
That's something that we're working on internally in Snook, just between people who are interested in working in the open. So where you might want to share something that you've done or thought about, or I don't know, finished with a client, that comes from reflecting, but also just generally documenting your work anyway, which is something we should be doing. You're right, we should every day just be like, oh, here's the thing that happened. Instead of scrambling at the end of a project going, what the fuck, what do we do? So we're talking about creative documentation, and
using illustration and film making and things that we're keen on doing just personally to capture throughout a project. And then today we were throwing around the idea on Slack that a lot of us get stuck with our week notes or blog posts that we want to do regularly because we don't quite know how to say what we're trying to say. We don't know if we can say what we want to say. So we're floating the idea now of sitting down and not really interviewing each other, but just sort of talking and having prompts and then documenting that conversation and then turning that around to either project documentation or something for the public. I don't know why we don't reflect. It's crazy, and it's
like running at light speed though. You don't have time to do it. No.
But do you need time to do it? Does that make sense? Shouldn't it just be woven in to what you're doing?
I don't know. I think that maybe depends on personality.
Yeah,
for me to reflect, I need to like step out or have a break. But other people maybe reflect by speaking.
Mm-hmm. So how do you make space for all different types of ways that needs to happen? I don't know.
I think for me, like I think every organization I've ever worked in or with like feels like they don't have time to reflect or like don't have time to do a good job, whatever. So like if we just accept that none of us feel like we have enough time, then we can figure out like how we're going to build this stuff in. Like last week I guess it could be considered a fuck up. Like I was just feeling like really unfocused on Thursday morning and just like messaged all my clients saying like, guys, I'm just going to have to not do any work today and tomorrow. Like it's just not going to happen. I'll be back in on Tuesday and I'll absolutely smash it. But like, I'm not going to be any use to you. And like, luckily we work with some pretty good people who like understand the importance of like mental health and that kind of thing. And they were really great about it. And then, I had like a great weekend. And today I've been far, far more productive than I would have been in those 2 days in like the first 3 hours of today. So for me, it's about like, it's less about like the amount of time and more about the quality of the time we spend doing things. Like I essentially had like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday of like non-working time, but I actually did far more work today than I would have done in those 4 days because I was in the right frame of mind.
No, and I'd completely agree. And I mean, with regards to, I think there's something we can even borrow from mental health. Like I think there's some really interesting kind of tools and techniques with regards to, how you, like in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a lot around how you address situations and how do you reflect upon those situations in order to increase your confidence maybe around a certain topic or something. But maybe we don't apply, we kind of box things in. It's like, okay, I'll use Trello for these kind of things, and I'll use my CBT methods for these kind of things, rather than maybe thinking about how could this help. A bit like what Andy's talking about, like if we do fuck up something at work, that will remain on our mind afterwards, and vice versa. If we've had an argument with a partner and said the wrong thing or said something to a friend, that will then impact our work as well. So I think whatever reflection tools and stuff we have, it's about how can we borrow tools maybe from other areas just to help us take that time to then learn and then make a change and make things better. And as designers, we're so used to doing that. Like we prototype and we try, and if something goes wrong, okay, let's try something else. But we maybe don't always document that in the way that we get the most out of it.
Yeah,
Tom,
I'm just going to carry on from there?
I'm curious to hear what's on Tom's mind.
That point on mental health really resonates with me. What you mentioned around CBT there, Christina, because there are some reflection tools that really do use that. You observe the situation, what happened, how did you feel, what did you learn from it, and how you're going to apply that as an example is more or less borrowed from CBT. And as a journaling sort of tool, that really helps me. The thing I thought of as you said that was that it reminded me of in meditation, and it's now like neuroscience has kind of validated this, that there's a difference between pain and suffering. So you can hurt yourself physically, and that will trigger a part of your brain. But you're not suffering until the second part of your brain decides that they didn't like the pain. If you can train your brain to remain balanced to that initial pain, you don't suffer. And I think to bring this back to failures, I often have events that are failures, and they're just facts that, I don't know, I did something wrong, something that I perceive as being wrong or negative happened, but then my reaction to that is the important thing. If I decide that it's an opportunity to learn, then it's not a fuck up. If I decide that I feel one of the more pointless emotions, like guilty or ashamed or embarrassed, then I've truly created a fuck up, I think, in that scenario. And that is only within my mind. The event happened. It's only within my subjective experience that I can hopefully manage whether it's a fuck up or not. I think that's something that I feel, I'm sure we could all learn, but I definitely could learn to react to those events in a way that make them more constructive and less harmful, mainly for myself, really.
I think that's really interesting, because I think how you react to a situation massively depends. And again, kind of going back to Andy's point, when you're then working with a team, what one person will perceive as a fuck up, someone else won't. They'll just brush it off, and then you're like, what? How did you not imagine that to happen? And that's happened to me a few times, whether it's with groups of friends or it's with kind of team projects, where your perception of something going, completely wrong, someone else is like, no, but that went great because of this. So again, surrounding yourself with people who maybe have slightly different reactions or thresholds is then kind of good, because they can help you maybe shift your perspective on something. And I think that's the type of thing that maybe starts to shift this culture of fear, either in an organization or in a team, because if one person doesn't fear it, then that positivity is maybe a little bit more infectious. But I think it's about sharing and about getting perspective, because otherwise you're just trapped in your own kind of, what happened here, did it go well, what could have happened differently, kind of spiral.
You triangulate your perspective against a few others, and you sort of tend to net out at something that's probably more accurate than your raw emotions initially kind of decided on, I guess, in that situations where we create these forums for sharing. An example that I thought of when you mentioned perspectives there is when someone's late to a meeting, you can be incredibly annoyed that person was late to the meeting and we're now 10 minutes late. Or you can say, great, I've got 10 minutes to dawdle, think, but the event is the same, and yet our reaction or the perspective that you chose has made this event bad. And that's just made up in our minds, I guess.
I'm going to ask a question to the group in a second, but before I do that, I'm wondering if Tom's got anything he wants to share, because he's smiling and shaking his head and stroking his beard and just doing the Tom stuff. And I want to.
I'm just loving the words that have been said here. I don't have any real examples of fucking up, not any out to share, but fear, shame, pain, suffering. It all comes from my point of view. It all comes from communication and expectation management. If you don't do that, and a point passes, and you get more, and you think, and internally you're thinking about that one thing, that does the fear. Something that won't happen, probably won't happen. They keeps telling me this. That's not going to happen. Stop ruin over something. Stop distilling it in your head, making it stronger. And it is all, fucking up is internal, like everybody's been saying around the table here. And it is about reflection. And why don't we reflect? We don't value it. Or, who will work, you talk about time. And so you finish something, you should have at least, a period of reflection, but you go, no, let's go on to the next project. And it is about, what's the word? It's about making something worthwhile and respecting yourself and using that as an important period of whatever the word is I'm trying to think about in my head.
What were you going to say? Well, maybe off the back of that as well, I think it's it's about taking stock for the better or for the worse. I remember doing a project and kind of going to do like the final graduation with some young people, and I think just before something hadn't gone to plan, or it was quite a few years ago, I don't remember what it was, but very much focusing on the negative and like that one thing that went wrong, and was reminded by a guy from Israel who was like very much focusing on that being quite an English attribute, to focus on the negative and, you know, not praise and not like self-love, and be like, actually, I led a really cool project for 2 weeks and look at these people and how happy they are. Screw the plan, like, doesn't really matter. But I think as much as it is like taking stock that thing didn't work and that's something to take for next time, it's like being like, congratulate yourselves as well for everything that did go right. And on John's point around perception of the past and what happened, I was watching Daniel Kahneman's TED talk on memory and kind of perceived memories. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's all about how we kind of package that up at the end. And maybe if we do document as we go through, we'll see more of the fun and more of the good stuff, that you're not just then left with the end result that I think when it's small budgets and small timescales is actually always unachievable.
Is that the peak end rule stuff where he does the test where they like put something, what's it called? Like when you have like a camera up your bum? Is it that one? No?
No, but he's done so much.
Okay, there's one like that anyway. Like if the end of the experience is better, but the total is objectively worse, then it's perceived as better.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the procedure, but he spoke with patients who had something up their bum, but for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And then someone that had a more gentle experience, but for a longer amount of time, and measured who had a more disturbing experience, and I think it was the longer because of the memory. The duration of experience.
Yeah. Yes, I wasn't just being rude. I have a yes and to the British kind of culture thing. I guess it's a British culture thing, because I think our approach to using humor to deal with like fuck ups or bad situations is, I think it's sometimes quite useful. Like the way I think it can also be damaging in a way to like hide away from having real conversations. But the way me and John laugh about like these projects that we've bulldozed into, like it's become part of our shared culture as like a small organization. And I think it's useful to twist these things that have gone wrong into humor and laugh at them and to hold them quite lightly, rather than just kind of moping around. Like I said, I think that can be a double-edged sword, but I don't know, it's that kind of like the gallows humor type idea that I think can be quite useful.
I love that whole self-deprecating British thing, but I heard recently, and I think it comes from psychology, that you apparently, like, when you say, I don't know, like, oh God, I'm so stupid or clumsy or whatever, apparently like your mind doesn't know that you're joking. It like doesn't understand that it's a joke. So we're all there with our self-deprecating gallows humor and loving it, but maybe it's still sending a message to ourselves that says, no, actually I am like useless and clumsy or whatever.
Yeah, I can see that.
No, I think language is really interesting. Because I caught a bit of I don't know who it was, but it was someone who'd done a TED talk, and they were talking about how your language changes your action. So they were talking about how in Britain we would say you broke the vase, whereas in Spanish we would say the vase broke, because in English we have a large blame culture going on, and how in Japan, because there's not the same, there's not the same future tense, they're so much better at saving money, and I think that is the idea of blame. I don't know if that's what makes fuck ups harder from a kind of British English perspective or not, just because of how we talk about them. And I think that's how we talk about them, and just the fact that we will actually talk about them does make a difference. So we need to change the culture, right?
Can I jump in on that too then and ask a question? I think this really building on what Christina said there, this like this idea of talking about them. I've got two things that run through my head. I'll mention the first one first because it's quicker. I reckon the average age here is about 32. Tom's made it quite higher. But I reckon the average age is about 32 here. So my first thought was like, is there something about our age that, like the fact that we're a bit older, that's allowing us space to reflect and accept failure? And the second part, which is more a question but a bit of an observation too, I'm pretty sure most of the world has seen the Ken Robinson talk on creativity in schools and stuff, the TED Talk, and I'm going to bastardize this a wee bit, but just to give it some context in here, one of the things I take from it is that we've built a system where you're right or wrong, right? 1 + 1 is 2. If it's 3, you're wrong, right? So this idea of how we're educated from a young age is pass or fail. If you don't get your 5 A's, you don't make it to Cambridge. If you don't get your 2 A's and a B, you don't make it to Glasgow School of Art. Wherever we educate, right? So that's how we're taught up till we're, 17, 18, 19, if we're lucky enough to stay in school or choose to stay in school. And then we get to work, and so we've got this whole experience of like, we have to be right. Like everything, we have to be right through all of that space. And then suddenly we're at work, and I still want to be right. I want to be right. Okay. I want people to know I'm right and to know that the work I'm doing is right and it's good. And so my question to the group, I think, which we've got 20 minutes left, 19. Yeah. I guess is, what is failure and who defines failure? Because what I'm noticing from the conversation actually is a lot of the stuff that we've all failed at has allowed us to draw some learnings and maybe some successes from, as in I've learned this thing, I won't do that again. And so, yeah, I guess it kind of resonates from last night. I just wonder if anybody has any views on what is failure, because the Oxford Dictionary says failure is not a success. And then I guess my question is, what is success and who defines success? But I'm going to stick to the first one. I wonder what anybody thinks. What is failure?
I think it's a judgment. It's all a judgment. It's all a personal judgment. I think I did well. I think I didn't do well. Or you judge others. I think my colleague did well. My colleague didn't do well. It's so abstract, actually. There are like real genuine fuck-ups that we make, like, real mistakes that everyone could say like, yeah, that was really silly, but it happened because, and we learned from it. I think it's all just a big fat judgment. And I've got 10 years on your average age, and I'm much less attached to being right than ever before. And I think I took a year's sabbatical until quite recently from my own indie consultancy, to borrow Jim's terminology. And I think, a lot of the self-reflection and a lot of the personal work that I did in that time, and also going into kind of mindfulness and all of that, they are much, much less attached to being right. And I've seen that the way that I interact with my colleagues now is very different.
I want to answer that question or give some colour to it from a school experience as well, because you mentioned that, Andy. And that was that my little boy, who's 7, went to a directive school, as I now know they're called, which we've most of us been to, I guess. So where you're kind of it's a bit more directive and didactic the way you're taught. We went to a democratic school to try that. And on his first day, he like genuinely freaked out. Like I could see him visibly anxious and struggling because of some tiny decisions. So one was some kids were working with paper landscape and some portrait. And the others was that some kids were wearing shoes and some weren't wearing shoes. And what he wanted, he was saying, John, can you tell me which should I do? And so I'm doing the whole, you're not supposed to tell them anything. It's a guide. You're supposed to guide and not teach them. Like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, no, just tell me. And he's totally freaking out. And a couple of weeks later, he'd really dropped that. And at the end of the experience, I put it on video. I asked him, what's the difference between this school and your old school? And like so succinctly, he just said, when my old school, they told me what was right or wrong. In this school, I get to decide. And I think that, like, the fact that it's a 7-year-old saying that gives some perspective as to how we've all grown up with an external person or system telling us what right or wrong is rather than ourselves. And one of the things they taught us as parents in this school was that when your kid comes to you running and says, "Isn't my drawing beautiful? Tell me how beautiful my drawing is," you should let them decide whether they think their drawing's beautiful. So you should say, "Oh, I see a dolphin," or "I see a whale. Are you happy with it?" And put it back to them to decide whether they think it's a success or a failure, rather than me putting that on him and then him feeling like he failed or whatever. But making it at least our own judgment. Although I agree, Catherine, it is still a totally subjective story that we've made up, that it's good or bad ultimately.
Yeah, picking up on the school thing, I actually wanted to kind of pull Andy back in and see what his experience is of people at Hyper Island, because we've got quite a few colleagues here from Hyper Island where I feel like it's a lot more freer with regards to the kind of what you do. There's not necessarily right or wrong. You kind of choose the courses you're interested in, and I'm wondering from a kind of creative perspective, like, do you find those students approach the success or failure of their projects differently from how maybe like we did at GSA, where someone's opinion base deemed it correct or not?
Oh shit. Okay, so
openness and realness, Andy.
Yeah, okay, that's what Jim and I talked about on the phone. Yeah, so I'll go. Yeah, I started working on Hyper Island 6 years ago, and about 6 years ago, and the reason I still work with them is I think the way, from an outsider's perspective, right? So I come in to support a module, right? So I support a small part of the education system at Hyper. And so that affords me lots of benefits in the fact I don't have to be in the rigmarole of being involved with Hyper. You know, I'm not employed by them, blah, blah, blah. I get to come in and do my thing, and they employ me to do my thing, which is quite empowering, and also is great for me because I think I do a good job. I get good feedback and from the students and the staff. So one of the things I used to talk about quite a lot early on about Hyper was that what I felt that we were taught, if you like. So for those watching, Christina and I both studied at GSA. Christina was a year above me at the Glasgow School of Art. What I thought, certainly early on in our education, was we were like, well, what Hyper does is learning by doing. So the students were being educated through live projects. They were working with real clients. There was real responsibility. And I think what we were sort of being what I experienced certainly through some of the earlier projects was different. So I was being taught in some ways by people who hadn't worked for a long time and who had been in that education system and been teaching people about learning by theory as opposed to learning by what it's like in the real world. So one of the reasons I love going to Hyper is that, you know, the mix of students, of demographics, of cultures, it's just a melting pot of wonderful people who really want to shake things up. And I think it's an interesting dichotomy because they still have to get a master's, right? That ultimately they're still in a program where they have to pass or fail. So there's still a right or wrong. But I think more broadly, there's a more open learning environment, which allows me to do deeper and more meaningful work, and I think allows the people who come on to the Hyper Island program to not just explore who they are as designers or creatives or where they want to go, but it also forces them. I mean, it literally forces them. There's Way Week forces people to ask questions about themselves that they've maybe never asked before, and I think that's really, really, really fucking important, and it's something that more of us should do. And Yeah, I mean, maybe you could punt that question to Jim or John, because they've both been at Hyper way longer than I have. And like I said, my involvement is annually and for about 2 or 3 weeks. Jim was well, I don't know how long Jim was there. He can tell you, and John as well. So yeah, be curious what their guys' thoughts are, because I know Flux. My partner Alex is really interested in redesigning education. I know that's something that John and Jim have talked a lot about through Flux. Alex went to work for Skills Development Scotland in Glasgow, and she was looking at the future of education. I know that's something John and Jim have been exploring, and John just touched on there with his wee one as well. But I'd be curious to kind of draw those two in to hear what their thoughts are on that too, just to throw the stress that I'm feeling right now back to them. That's that reference to last night, Leah. Throw the stress onto John and Jim. It's not stress, but hey,
we should talk about that stress after. I suspect they might just define success in different ways. Like if success is defined in traditional education, like is defined externally through grades or like getting a really good crit from your professor or whatever, I suspect at places like Hyper Island that the definition of what is success like become like the individuals own it a bit more themselves, which creates this like a different problem for people. So rather they worry less about grades, but they maybe worry more about like their purpose and getting the right job and like aligning their like life plan with their career and this kind of the millennial problem I guess that a lot of people are feeling now. Yeah, that would be my take on it. That like we all have different definitions of what success are, and if failure is defined as like not success, then yeah, that just kind of shifts from an external definition of success to an internal one.
So just out of curiosity, do you think one of our issues is we're not very good at setting success criteria? Because if we're going through all this suffering because of these fuck ups that we have, is it because when we enter something, our success criteria is maybe not realistic, or maybe we don't have a success criteria as I want to learn something from this or something? Like, is that if failure is ultimately defined by how we define success, should we be redefining what success is in order to not suffer so much through these?
Yeah, well, my opinion is that I've lived a lot of my life like not really having an idea of what success looks like, of like not really knowing what the future is. For me, like past September or like past October is like a hazy mist. I have no like life goals really that are particularly concrete, and that's like really comforting for me, because like I can just kind of go wherever things take me, and I really feel like I'm not failing because like life's kind of unfolding in its like random way, and I'm not like I don't have a desire to be like a father of 3 living in a country house with with like a Mercedes or something. So because I don't have that image of what success looks like for me, it is immensely comforting to not have to work towards that. So that definitely works for me. the kind of an incredibly loose definition of success. But I know for others, like having a goal and having a purpose and a direction is really comforting and makes them feel safe. So I don't know, I suspect it's just different for everyone.
I'm reminded of 2 kind of principles here. One is it seems that failure is negative or bad when we're attached to an outcome, like when we're really attached to a particular expectation or outcome occurring. And if the algorithm in your body goes, if outcome does not occur, then flip out and panic, basically. And it seems that you can't feel like you failed if you weren't attached to an outcome. And the second one was, if it's an externally given outcome, like by an external system, like an exam, or like a pushy parent or a leader who expects too much of us. I think it's worse as well. And where I would put the sort of education and work piece together is that there's a leader who is autocratic or guiding, and somewhere on that spectrum. And what I think happens is that in systems where we don't let people get feedback from the real world, so when we don't get them experience small failures or pains or whatever, so you hear it particularly with parents, when a kid cries, you hear "don't cry, don't be angry," and these are moments where you're saying you're preventing that person from learning what it feels like to get through my own anger and through my own anxiety, thus meaning it'll be more likely to occur because I've not learned to deal with it, and that it is a bad thing. It's therefore a failure. But if we can be the kind of people, I think, who allow those micro events to happen, and not just let them happen in an unsafe way, but kind of compassionately look after someone in a scenario where something is difficult, but that person trusts us to somehow get through it ourselves through our own initiative, then I think we get resilient. And then I think failure's off the table, because every time it happens, your system's getting stronger, you're getting better at dealing with something. And that's, I think Andy mentioned that learning by doing, or learning to learn, is the kind of thing that happens there. And then I think failure is kind of off the table if you've been brought up or guided that way, to a degree at least.
I think it's probably related a bit to the age thing. You were asking about whether or not us having this conversation and being mature adults about talking about failure has something to do with age. And I think it is that resilience and the experience that's been built up that gets you to this place where you can reflect, or you do want to reflect and learn from your failure, air quotes.
Yeah, because by being older, you just kind of necessarily have to have failed and learned a bunch of times.
Probably.
Or I guess a lot of people also haven't.
And it's just a different perspective on your whole life, really.
And I think of course we all have completely different life situations, and in some lives, like where we feel more able to take risk, like we earn enough money to be able to take risks with our business, and like that's a really privileged position to be in. And some people just aren't in that situation, or don't feel like they are in that situation. So I think it's like, yeah, if like you have to risk to fail or succeed, then I think like your perception of what is risky in your own world is also different.
I love that you're wearing a t-shirt that says the Lucky Club, having said that, Jimbo.
We can all be in the Lucky Club. Cool. We've got 2 minutes to go. Go on, Andy. Have you got a thought? Go on. I was going to ask you to sum up anyway.
All right.
In that way that you do.
In that way that I do.
Yeah. Or if anyone else has any final thoughts before Andy does his summing up,
do that,
we'd love to hear them. If Steve, if you have any final thoughts, you've just popped in here at the last 15 minutes. You don't have to, but yeah, anyone with any closing thoughts?
Go on, Steve. What have you got? I didn't even see you there. I saw you last night, though.
Hello.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Cool. Sorry, guys. I'm on a train, so this is going to be pretty poor.
It's all right.
Sorry I'm late. Yeah, I think it's really good to catch the back end of this, and it's quite topical. I know that Andy and Leah were at this event we went to last night, the service design event, talking about failure. Sorry. I remember going on a studio tour down in London to a big studio, and I think it was about 2012, and one of the guys there kept on talking about how much he'd fucked up and how much money he'd lost the business, and like joyfully was telling us, oh yeah, we made this app and no one liked it, no one downloaded it, lost all this money. And I just thought, I came away from that thinking, like, man, it's crazy. But this dude was, I guess, ahead of his time. And I think there's not many of us are in that position where we do have free reign to just experiment and fail. You know, I take some of this chat about not being afraid to fail with a grain of salt. So few of us are in that position when you're working for, you know, a big organization. You've got targets and outcomes you sort of need to meet, and culturally they're not really built to support that sort of that environment. But no, I've been really inspired by today and yesterday. I think it's been really good. Sorry, I'm going to stop talking because I know there's a lot of background noise. I'll let you get on with it.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Andy, bring us home. What's your
okay, so I'm gonna pull two or a couple of things from yesterday and then do this quite quickly. Or I'll say quickly. Give me 3 minutes. There was a couple of things that stood out yesterday. One,
yesterday was an event about failure, right?
Sorry, so yesterday was, I mentioned it right at the start of the show. We're on a show. Yesterday at the start of the whatever this is, the Bizniz salon, there was a service design network event around failure, and somebody called Ian Crawford, who works at Equator, mentioned a couple of things. One of the things he mentioned was WD-40, which I think most people, and certainly here and maybe listening, will know what it is. And he told the crowd that WD-40 actually means water displacement attempt number 40. So they tried 39 times to get this formula right, and on the 40th attempt it worked. That was WD-40. Dyson tried 5,271 times, or he developed 5,271 prototypes over 15 years before he launched his first vacuum cleaner, which for anybody watching is a fuck ton of prototypes. Jim and I were just joking before we started. We normally encourage people to do 2. So yeah, Dyson up the mark. I think on reflection, there's probably 2 or 3 things that stand out. Interestingly, I said reflection because I think that's probably the first one. What I've noticed from the conversation in general is that it sounds like reflection is one of the key things to us making sense of failure or fuck ups, and that our ability to do that individually and collectively is a really important and integral part of making sense of it. So I feel these are kind of provocations actually, as opposed to reflections from the conversation. I don't actually think failure or fuck up is a real thing, because what I'm hearing from everybody is that most of us learn something from that and then have a choice to do something different. If we choose not to do that, that's fine, but a lot of us do. So I think reflection's a really important part of that. The second is in John's point, which I think was really, really important too, that actually, like this idea that failure is is negative when it's attached to an outcome. I think that's really poignant, because actually I think for most of us, again, the work that we do and the work we're invited to do involves clients asking us for an outcome, right? And if we don't meet that outcome, then surely that's a failure. And in my experience, often I might not reach that outcome, but other cool things happen, right? Like relationships are made, or bonds are made, or people grow, or people leave companies, which you would think, well, that's a fucking fail. I do a lot of coaching, and people might leave their company after the work we do, and the company might think, well, that was pretty shit. You were coaching my member of staff, and then they left. But perhaps maybe that's a success for that individual, but a failure, or it's seen as a failure for the company. So I think on John's point, and the final part is this idea of subjectivity. So that actually all of us are equally responsible for our view on what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, what's a failure and what's a success. And I think that kind of comes back to the point earlier around, I'm not sure there's any way to say what a failure looks like or what it doesn't, because ultimately I think what we've talked about through all of this is that if we are willing to be in a space of reflection and learning and moving on from that, then there's an opportunity for us to do something different next time. And I think that's, so I think for me, fuck ups feel like an empowering place to be, because we learn from them and stuff happens from that. So when we fuck up, we have a choice, and based on the choice that we make, we can then do something different from that. And that's a place of privilege and empowerment.
Nice. Thanks, Andy. You failed to get that into 3 minutes. Good job. Good job. Empowering. Thanks so much for coming, guys. We will explore the question for next time on the little Facebook group. So if anyone's not in there, I can add you in. And yeah, thanks for all your stories and thoughts and questions and opinions and stuff. It was a pleasure. We'll see you all again.
Thanks, guys. Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.